Thank you very much, everybody, for taking time to join us all in this pretty intense situation that we all find ourselves in. I'm pleased to be able to share some expertise with everybody who has joined us on this call. Just to give you a bit of a lay of the land, we have a few polling questions that we're going to be sharing with everyone during some of these remarks. I've asked Skip King, Nate Rangel, and DMAC to share with us for about 10 minutes their remarks, thoughts, and guidance, and then that gives us another half an hour to engage with them on questions and get it to specifics and answer some of the things that you guys would really like to have answered. So feel free to push out questions during the course of this, and we will be answering them either in the question panel of GoToWebinar, or we'll be answering them on the phone. I'll be bringing those questions up to our panelists. Some folks are having a little bit of trouble with the internet, so we've got Dave McGlashan is calling in because he wasn't able to get his get the program to work, and I think that is just the state of things as the internet is fairly maxed right now, and a lot of webinars are happening. So bear with us through some of our technical challenges, but first and foremost, thank you for tuning in. And so today we have Skip King. Skip King is a crisis communication expert, has a long relationship with AO, has attended our conference in the past, and we're pleased to have him back here again. He's been very involved with some large national organizations who have been thinking a lot about crisis communication through this, so really glad to have him with us. We have Dave McGlashan, he'll be our second panelist, our second speaker, goes by DMAC, and DMAC will be talking about their personal response at Adventure Trek. DMAC has been working with a small consortium of outfitters, and they have some unified language, and I think it's going to be helpful to hear about their model and approach. And then finally, we have Nate Rangel with California Outdoors, and California, of course, has grappled with a number of crises over the past several years. So I think Nate, with his perspective, can help us think about what our strategy should be in managing this crisis that we all face now. With that, I'm going to pass it off to Skip. And Skip, if you want to go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us about what you'd like to share, that would be, I'll be working to put your slide up while we're at.
Okay, just so you know, Aaron, the last part of your audio kind of cut out, so I'm assuming it's on to me. If anybody's having an issue hearing me, I can see Nate and I can see Aaron. If there's an audio problem, just wave at me and hopefully we can correct. So anyway, it's a pleasure to see you all. I just wish it was under happier circumstances. To start, get a few sort of zeitgeist issues and get into some practicals that you could consider going forward. Let's start by examining the confluence of what's going on, because a novel course is really only one of them. There's still a lot we don't know about this particular disease. We do know some things, though. We know that it's a novel coronavirus, which means we haven't seen this bug before, and because we haven't seen it, people have yet to develop natural immunity to it. That's a big part of the problem. Now, I'm not a doctor, and I don't want to give anyone the impression that I'm trained in this stuff. I also want to assure you I'm not skeptical of the threat. In fact, I'm personally in a higher risk category based on my age and the fact that I'm a lifelong asthmatic. Additionally, I have a sister who is highly prone to pneumonia at the best of times, so you can bet we've got her pretty much locked down right now. So yeah, I'm concerned. Now, with that said, the best that I've seen in this disease is actually pretty benign for most people, but there are some, notably older folks, for whom infection can be fatal, and it's complicated by the fact that infected individuals can apparently be asymptomatic for 5 or 6 days before they themselves get sick. Now, the disease itself is one thing, but there are other things happening as well. We should not overlook what's happening with the news media, which has become increasingly fragmented over the past 10 or 20 years, and that has to do with the internet and the profusion of cable TV outlets. We're living in a time in which media outlets are competing with one another ferociously for their own survival, and that's especially true for newspapers and their digital offspring. The market is so diluted that everyone is scrambling and everybody's getting a smaller piece of the pie. And frankly, many of the ad dollars that once went to the news outlets are being snapped up by Facebook and Google. Even the newspaper publishers of the century ago or so understood that you sold more newspapers by concentrating on stories of doom, death, and destruction. And it's important to remember that first and foremost, the news business isn't really there to inform us. It's a business, and it simply uses the news as a device to sell its real product, and that's advertising. In the case of nonprofit outlets like NPR, to sell underwriter support. The bottom line is a matter of serious concern. At the same time, news outlets write headlines these days with the ideas that articles will be shared on social media. The headlines are written to clicks. I'd like to take a look at how behavior is changing as a result of this situation. The H1N1 swine flu pandemic back in 2008 and 2009 gave every appearance of being just as frightening when it first appeared, and it was very serious. But we didn't see the extraordinary steps that we're seeing now, nor did we see the types of behavioral changes we're seeing now. I can really only recall 2 diseases in my lifetime that actually did change the way a lot of people behaved. The most recent was the HIV/AIDS situation back in the 80s and 90s, and that changed a tremendous amount of behavior. And it stands to reason because at one point the diagnosis of AIDS was a guaranteed death sentence. The treatments were developed, so most folks don't really worry about it much anymore. And I remember when I was very young, maybe 4 or 5, my mom would leave us in the car while she was shopping for food. I just thought that's the way things were done in a simpler time, but it turned out that her behavior was changed because there was a polio outbreak and the vaccines hadn't been developed yet. Behaviors change during health scares, and I think it's fair to say that a vast majority of Americans have never seen anything quite like this. This is a situation highly likely to change a lot of things for a long time. It's a culturally traumatic event of the sort that we have not seen since 9/11. So we are going to see some ongoing behavioral shifts as a result. A more benign example, I expect that once this is all over, a lot of people will keep a 3-month supply of toilet paper in the house. I think you'll see similar things with non-perishable foods. Now, here's our first major takeaway. You can assume that some of the behavioral shifts people are demonstrating today in response to this crisis are going to linger for a good long time, particularly in that it's going to be a while before we have a working vaccine. There are many different business types within the AOA community, so it would be foolish of me to offer across-the-board prescription, but ask yourself, based on the specific products or services that you sell and what you know about your clientele, what will you need to do differently going forward? I think it's a given that people are going to be far more concerned about sanitation and hygiene for the foreseeable future. What does that mean for you? Again, there's too many different sectors, so I really can't prescribe, but let me give you one example. If you run river trips, you need to figure out better ways to sanitize wetsuits, PFDs, and helmets. What's that going to look like for you with regard to both capital and labor costs? I encourage you to start thinking about this now, and here's why. Hope is that, like other forms of flu illnesses, incidence of the new COVID-19 cases will start naturally dropping as warm weather approaches and people start spending more time outside and with greater personal space. We're not going to know if that's the case for a while yet, but we could very well see it happen. Now, at least 2 clinical trials on vaccines started this week, and there's some promising research related to treatment mechanisms, but we are at least a year out, probably closer to 2, from an approved vaccine, and who knows how soon those treatment options themselves will be approved. So if we're going to try to salvage at least part of the summer season, several things really have to fall into place. The first is that federal and state governments ease up on our restrictions of movement. There's no way to tell at this point if they will, but let's hope that's the case and that it's warranted to do so. Assuming it does happen, it's going to be incumbent on all of us to do what we can to ensure that we're not actually providing vectors for transmission. And that's why I really recommend thinking about this stuff now. Now, there's a lot of additional considerations, and I don't have the time to consider them all here, but here are a couple I think you should keep top of mind, and those are staffing needs and policy changes. Let's take the policy aspect first. I presume that most of you folks don't do large amounts of walk-in business and that most of your services are pre-booked. Given that, I also presume that you're, or some of you at least, are already getting a pretty steady stream of calls and emails asking about cancellations. Now, I'm not running your business and I'm not about to tell you what to do, but I do think it's worth looking at what the airlines and major hotel chains are doing right now. Nearly all of them have enormously relaxed their policies with regard to cancellation and change fees. And if you haven't already done so, I would like to encourage you to at least think about doing something similar. Because bear this in mind, there's a certain point in every crisis where it's time to stop thinking about what do my customers think of me right now and start thinking about what do I want my customers to think about me once this is all over. It's critically important. Now, the same thing can be said about staff, so let's talk about that need next. Your staff is likely to be thinking about a number of things right now, including how am I going to put food on the table and am I at risk myself? Now, we may know more about all this, how all this is going to look within a month or so, and at least in theory, that should give us at least some time to ramp up staffing for the summer, but we need to be cognizant of the uncertainty out there. I think it's reasonable, even necessary, to convey cautious optimism, but we've really got to be careful about overpromising. Now, I also presume that most of you are working with staff that's largely seasonal, which potentially gives you a little more flexibility. I do encourage those of you who have full-timers to keep them on, if only with a partial schedule, if you can figure out a way to afford doing so. You made them full-time for a reason. They were worth it. They're the linchpins for making things happen. And realistically, the same goes for your senior most seasonal help. Losing them is likely to be a lot more damaging than losing the others. Now, let's talk about messaging. I think you need to communicate with your clientele and your staff regularly. Don't oversaturate them, by the way. How many emails are you getting a day from organizations that you've got a relationship with? And that's on top of the barrage that we're getting from the news media and from, social media and that kind of thing. But do pick a reasonable schedule every 2 or 3 weeks or so just to stay in touch with them. As of today, I think it may be reasonable to suggest that you do expect to operate this summer in some form, as long as you actually do, of course, but that you don't know quite yet what that's going to look like. And that's entirely fair because nobody else does either. As things become more clear, share that information too, good or bad. Remember, we need to think about how people will think of us once this is over. Please be careful not to use cliches in these communications. Personally, I'm always skeptical when some organization tells me that safety is our top priority when I know that they're a business that's actually fueled by adrenaline and risk. So how do you effectively convey the same message? There are ways to do it. You can say things like, your safety is a top priority for us. Notice I say a top priority, not the top priority, and I dare say that's true. Or you could say, nothing is more important to us than your safety, and that passes the smell test too. Safety and business continuity, in my view, are the co-equal focuses of well-run outdoors businesses. Be candid. Tell people what you think things will look like based upon what you know now. Acknowledge that they could change. Update them when and if it does. Tell them what you're doing with operational changes and with your pricing or cancellation policies. The key is to be upfront. So, how are we actually going to do those communications? Think in terms of stakeholder groups. These are the groups of people who are interested in you and your business, and the way we communicate with each group is really kind of dependent upon who they are. For example, if you need to communicate with the Forest Service or another permitting organization, well, I'd ask you, how do you normally communicate with those folks? Start with that one. Key stakeholders like chambers of commerce, tourism promotional groups, key lodging partners, your group leaders, I'd probably do that by phone if I could. Key staff, definitely by phone. Seasonal staff, I think that depends on the numbers. Phone if possible. If not, I'd personally use email. As far as your customer base, again, how do you normally stay in touch with them? Email lists are a great tool for this, and sending out reasonable messaging via social media can be a good choice too. But one caveat on that last part, be careful not to invite blowback by promoting too aggressively or overpromising. As evidence, I'd note that the vast majority of the United States ski industry is now closed due to the virus, but a handful of resorts are still open. I'm watching their social streams, and half the commenters are appreciative. The other half are irate, both at the resort and the people that are choosing to ski right now. So use caution. Be cognizant of the angst out there. Think about what you need to change with operations. Think about what to say, how to say it, and how to get those messages out. I'll end my remarks at this point, but I will be available for questions at the end, and I thank you for your attention.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Skip. I hope that we can turn to DMAC, though I have not heard him talk this entire time. He was on when we were prepping. DMAC, can you hear us? Yeah, that's unfortunate. So I think what we'll do, Nate, is we will start with you, and while we're working through that, I will be trying to track down DMAC otherwise and see what kind of trouble he's having.
Okay.
So I'm turning on.
Hang on. Let me.
Yeah.
There you go. Hang on. Let me go to that. There we go. All right. All righty. Start now. Aaron?
Yeah, please do. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. So, hey, hi.
Yeah.
I just wanted to share a couple of things. Aaron and I talked, and we've done a few things in California. Real briefly, we started working together as an industry pretty closely back in the late 80s. We had a 5-year drought and 6-year drought from 87 to 92, and we started noticing that people actually realized that what comes down from the sky made a difference to the water situation in California. Not before that drought, it seemed to me. I mean, I grew up in LA, and it wasn't until about 88, 89 that the LA Times started putting on the front page big giant drought warnings. And so we as an industry got together, hired an individual who worked with us to put out a specific message. And that's what I'm here to share with you, is that what we've done in California in the past when we've dealt with stuff like fires and floods and particularly droughts is have an effective and unified communication. I'm preaching to the choir, but we know that we all operate in rural communities. Many of us live in those communities, and so what we're trying to do here in California, and why I'm listening to all this, because I want to learn, is we want to find out the best way to deal with all this. That's why we're on this, and it's also different. As Skip was pointing out, this is pretty unprecedented. One of my colleagues, we started this discussion about a week ago here in California. One of my colleagues pointed something out to us this week that I hadn't thought about, and that was that whilst we've had unified messages in the past to deal with, what to expect, drought or other situations that we dealt with, this is really different because in the past we'd bring people in, we send out a message, we attempt to get new customers and allay the fears of our current customer base. But now what we're going to do is not going to only affect the livelihoods of the folks in our communities, but it could affect their health. It could affect their actual lives. And so the message that we come up with, we think, some of my colleagues think, needs to not only be shared with our customers, but with our local communities. And I think that's probably the biggest difference. You and I and all of us know that we're the engine that drives economies in these communities. And so it makes it even more important that our local communities understand what we're doing and how that's going to affect them. So basically, along with what Skip said, I would say that what we're working on and what I suggest is that we have a plan, that it's comprehensive, that it's realistic, that it directly deals with the issues at hand, that it's not candy coated, that it's not happy talk, but that it has honest appraisals and actions that are verifiable. All of us have, and Skip mentioned this, all of us have media contacts. Most of us do. Reporters, writers, newspapers, television stations, websites. We're going to start getting calls from those people. I got a couple of calls just in the last week from a couple of writers for 2 different newspapers asking for commentary on what's happening. And that's why I think it's important that, all of us will have our own thing that we're doing, that we're coming up with. But I think it's important as an industry, when possible, to have a unified voice, a unified message that will speak to the issues and won't sound like, 30 different folks saying 30 different things. Because I think it's a unified, our experience has been that a unified, simple, straightforward message gets the point across a lot more strongly. And that's all I had. I didn't have anything else to share with the group. I'm mostly here to listen.
Okay. Thank you very much, Nate. And again, thanks to all who are commenting through the questions on your struggles. I do apologize for that. Recognizing that we are maxing this technology here. So yeah, we as the AO staff will be doing what we can to get this message out that Nate has shared, that Skip has shared in other ways, if this hasn't worked well for you. So we do have DMAC back. I don't know if he can talk yet, but let's see. DMAC, are you with us? No. I'm afraid not. I'm afraid not. So I think what we will have to do is just move to questions at this point. Sorry to turn you off, Nate. I'll turn you back on. And I do have an ability to call on people if they are raising their hand. I did see a hand up by Lindsay Winter. So I am going to unmute you in just 1 second, Lindsay, and give you a chance to ask your question. And DMAC, just keep trying to call back in and just start talking. Lindsay, you are unmuted. Did you have a question?
No, sorry, that was actually an accident.
Oh, that's me.
And it's not Lindsay, but Lindsay's here. This is Dean Kenneth with Arizona River Runners and Great
Okay.
Canyon. But thank you.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much. I do have a question, and I'm just going to pose this to Nate, to you, and to Skip. A lot of questions, actually. We're hearing that if anyone, this is coming from Luke Ba. He says, if anyone wants to save their 2020 season, you need to focus on reallocating resources to different revenue streams to match the evolving economy, match demand with supply of what is being demanded. Luke is coming at this, I believe, from a pretty remarkable place of recognizing very significant downturns. What do you guys think folks should be doing operationally? I think especially this might be a good question for you, Nate, to grapple with it.
Oh, great, thanks. Okay, different operational strategies. You know, honestly, we haven't, my team, my partner, the folks I work with, we're just now starting to sit down and deal with all this. We're meeting this weekend for 3 days to talk about how we're going to deal with these things more specifically. I honestly have not given much thought, or any really, frankly, to different strategies in terms of operations beyond the specifics about, I think we're assuming that we're going to have, you know, Skip mentioned, it seems okay, I think, for us to assume we're going to have some sort of a season. Don't know what it's going to look like. Don't know how large it's going to be. Sure, it's going to have an effect on us. We're not, you know, we're not like a lot of outfitters, particularly back east, that have got numerous offerings of, you know, resorts and other things that they're offering. So we've got some things that we do that are a little different than just rafting, and we're going to focus on those. We've got a few partnerships that we're working on that are going to allow us to reach out, and I think maybe that would be it. Would be partnerships with other organizations that have complementary activities that we might be able to form a strategic partnership with that will help us in the short term, and then maybe in the long term, you know, helps both. Helps both organizations, but in the long term, helps us, you know, be a little bit more effectively not affected by these kinds of situations, be it drought or this situation, or other things that affect our businesses and give them spikes and dips. That wasn't the most intelligent answer, but I think that's the best I got.
I think that was helpful, indeed. And I have a question now for you, Skip, though these questions keep on rolling. And that is, 1 second, Skip. I just got bumped off. Okay, this is coming from Brooke Randy. She's asking if we haven't had many calls, is sending out communication recommended? not trying to sound alarm bells that may instigate cancellations? Should we be practicing proactive outreach?
That is a wonderful question. And I would say that it's somewhat dependent on who your clientele is and whether or not most of your clientele is returning or whether it's just new folks. If it's returning, I would definitely get in touch just to let them know what you're up to and what you're projecting to the best of your ability to do so. And I think that if you haven't been getting many queries yet, I think that maybe that's a little bit of a function of when your reservation cycle really starts to ramp up for the summer. It could well be that that you're normally quiet at this time of year and that there's nothing particularly unusual about the fact that a whole lot of people aren't reaching out to you yet. But as the summer approaches and they start thinking about engaging in the activities that you provide, at minimum, I'd be ready to answer the question. And I think, you know, it gets back to what I was saying earlier. Start planning. Think in terms of how your operations are likely to change based on what you know right now, and put a few contingencies in there about how things might change depending on what we learn. If, for example, you know, the shelter in place stuff goes away in another 2 to 3 weeks, or whatever new developments we see with this, you can adapt on the fly. But think in terms of best case, worst case, and somewhat in the middle scenarios and what that might look like operationally, and then map your communications accordingly. I would, you know, I'll leave it to you based on your knowledge of your clientele as to when to start touching them. But I'd be getting ready to do so, and then you can make the decision based on the realities of your own operation as to when the best place or the best time to start actually doing that is.
That's great. Thank you very much, Skip. I want to sort of acknowledge that there are already, I think, more questions than we'll ever be able to get through, and I thank you both for helping us manage this. Question for you, Nate, is does California have a unified message? It's coming from Greg McFadden in Idaho.
Hey, Greg. Not yet, no. We sent a note out to the outfitters about a week ago, gotten some response back. Looks like we sent out a doodle poll yesterday or the day before, I forget. And it looks like we're going to sit down as a group. We're trying to sit down as a group in a large outdoor venue that's covered. If we don't feel that that's appropriate and safe, then we'll do it by phone. But we're planning to get together the end of this month, like the 31st, the 1st, 2nd, 3rd of April, somewhere in that time frame. That's what we're looking to do. And we'll see. Hopefully, you know, one of the things that I'm noticing, Greg, is I don't know what it's like in Idaho, but you know, the outfitting in California is a vastly changed world. A lot of folks that were in business when I started 35 years ago have retired, have moved on, have sold their businesses, et cetera. There are a lot of new players, and at least in California, it seems to me that there's a different, I don't know if I call it attitude, but just a different way of looking at the way we do business. It seemed to me back then there was more of a, you know, we really need to work together because we got lots of people coming at us from all sorts of places. Because as we all know, when you work on natural resources or public resources, everybody wants a piece of the action to tell you what you should be doing. That seems to have changed a little bit over the last few years. But I think still there's a recognition that, particularly with something like this, we needed to do that. So that was a long answer to no. We don't have a unified message yet. No. We will, hopefully, by the end of this month.
It's certainly a piece that I was thinking DMAC could speak to, and it was significant to me when he and I were engaging early on. That his message was about having a unified voice from the industry. I think the message for a lot of folks in the industry has been changing almost daily. So it certainly has been hard to get wrapped around that. And, you know, a lot of folks who are operating now or would normally be operating now have shut down or are preparing to shut down. And folks are grappling with cancellations and extension requests too. I wonder, Skip, Nate, if you might have any insight for people and in what they might want to do about what people are doing for cancellations. This is a question that's coming from Cassie Baltelli.
Well, Skip,
Nate,
you know, yeah, go ahead, Skip. You go. You go
no,
first.
I was gonna toss it to you because you're a lot closer to the industry than I am.
Well, you know, you pointed out that we need to look at changing our cancellation policies. And certainly that's happening pretty much across the board. We're doing that. I think we did that this week. Our company, Raft California, we changed it to make it a little bit more, a little less restrictive, basically. And we're encouraging people to to sign up and know that they're not going to lose their money. You know, if you want to, you can go on our website and see what the cancellation policy is. But basically, yeah, I think that that's important to take a look at that. We're going to take a hit. There's no way around that. And that's why I think that it's important that we, as you know, like our company, my company, my partner, my managers, our company, that we're together and what we're going to be sharing with our guests. And I think it's important for the industry to have that. Now, it doesn't mean that we all have to have the same cancellation policy, but I think it's helpful that we do adjust that and recognize that we're going to have to be a little bit more flexible than we have in the past, because people, particularly, what I want to get is folks signing up now for June and July and August and September, and that's not happening a whole lot because of the very real concerns that folks have. And so, I was going to go off to Argentina this fall. Don't know if I'm going to do that, and probably won't make that call until later this summer when I see what's happening in the world and what's happening with our business. So, I think that folks are going to be delaying a little bit more. We've all been, a part of the last 20 years, going from this time and 30 years ago, a third of our use, my company's use, would be already filled by the middle of March, early part of April. Now that just doesn't happen. We're not on the Grand Canyon. We don't have those kinds of 1 year in advance reservations for the most part. And it's always been, as we all know, always been a little bit later. It's like next day sometimes, often. So this situation will exacerbate that. I think Skip pointed out the difference between dealing with our current customer base versus like new customers. Certainly with our current customer base, I think it's important to reach out to them sooner rather than later. I think it's important to let them know what we're doing, how we're changing our operation, how, what mitigations we're going to put into place to make sure that they're going to have a safe trip. From my perspective, and I think from a lot of ours, to the degree that we're not going to be locked down in place in our homes for the next 4 months, hopefully, if that's not the case, there's not a better place for folks to go out and get on any one of your trips or go to any one of your resorts to get into the outdoors. And so that's something that I think we need to emphasize. So we gotta live with the fact that we're going to lose some money, and I think it's important that we loosen up on the cancellation policy so that folks aren't afraid to make a reservation.
I'd just like to add a couple. I'd just like to add a couple things to what Nate said. I agree largely with it. The airlines were way out front on this, to their great credit. They basically changed their cancellation fees and their flight change fees to basically take them more or less down to zero. Now, in some of your situations, I don't know what your books look like. It may be that you decide that you want to first steer people towards the idea that if you can't make it because of this at the time you're booked, we'll hold your reservation for a year. And the unspoken part of that is, of course, and your money. But you may, and that may be fine for some of these folks, or they may push back, and that's where you're going to need to get a little more flexible. I come back to that point that it's not just what people think of you today that's important when we're in a situation like this. It's what are they going to think about you if once this is all over. And if they're cheesed off at you because they wanted to cancel and you wouldn't let them get their money back, odds are pretty good that's a customer that's never coming back to your door again. And I think you need to keep that kind of thing in mind. The good news in all of this is if, and it is an if at this time, but if things do lighten up as we get towards summer and, you know, freedom of movement is more permissible and we don't see quite the same level of online social media shaming that we saw with the ski industry, and you know, the number of cases naturally goes down the way a lot of people expect that it will. There may be a fair amount of pent-up demand out there when you get right down to it, because I don't know about your neck of the woods, but people around here are going a little bit hoopy, and it's only been 4 days. You know, people want to get outside and do fun stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I agree.
So we've got a
And
couple
can I
have their
just
hands up.
mention one, Aaron, can I just
Sure,
mention
go
one quick thing to add on to Skip? What Skip pointed out about, I think it's critical what our customers are going to think about us in the future. And in particular, given today's, you know, Yelp, TripAdvisor, you know, the customer reviews, that's something we should be really, really sensitive to, because if we aren't sensitive to folks, you know, and what happens with cancellations, I mean, I'm pretty darn sure that would really, you know, pop up in negative reviews that will just amplify the you know, that customer's opinion of us. So that's just another thing. I think it's obvious, but I think it's important to point that out.
As we've been answering this question, we've had a poll running about people's cancellation policies, and I'll share that I'll share that as it wraps it up. But so far, folks are kind of across the board with more offering credits toward future travel to get some flexibility, but keep some cash on hand. So a couple people have their hands up, and Luke Baugh has had his hand up for a while, so I'm going to unmute your microphone, Luke. Please. Oh, it's self-muted. So if you could unmute your microphone, Luke, we'd love to give you a chance to weigh in here. And I think your concerns are on another level. So let's see what you have to say.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. Yeah. So guys, my business is based out of Seattle. We kind of felt this a little bit earlier than everybody. There's more of us on the Pacific Northwest. So I think everybody knows what the trends are. And, you know, I studied infectious diseases in my undergrad and then stats in my MBA and so forth. And so kind of like what was mentioned before, every time we look at a scenario every week, I triage the options 1, 2, 3, kind of the third one being the worst case scenario. And so far every week, the worst case scenario has been met. And as you guys know, the arc of the disease is exponentially growing. And I know some of you guys are in places that have been hit, but around here, hospitals are overrun. And I can tell you that right now, there's a lot of public shaming for anybody that's not just going out and climbing or rafting, but anybody that's even traveling around out here. They're going to go down in history as being the biggest assholes in the community. So I would just say, like, when that gets to you, I would just be careful what you do. And I would also just remind everybody that there's some really basic economics going on here, that supply and demand is still at play. And if we got to recognize that demand for our services, if we're in guiding and tourism, they're going way, way down. And if we all continue to scramble for that small bit of demand, then the supply is going to be high and prices and profits are going to go down for everybody. So I just would like to say too, like, we've got some really brilliant people, I'm sure, that are on this call. I know Greg McFadden's here, and I don't know all of you, but I definitely think that we have to have somebody with a voice at the federal level to make sure that people understand that the tourism industry is being hit. So there's a lot of relief that's being provided for airlines and so forth. And I think we need a unified voice in that regard. And so obviously I'm advocating for scaling back, not because I want that. This was going to be a nice big growth year for us, but I'm just telling you that I think it's inevitable, and that's what we've seen here. there's other things that we can do for the resources that we have and try to keep the guides employed. But right now we're staring down, you know, a lot of refunds, which is difficult to do when you're going to be jumbling all kinds of other things, and you just don't want to be dealing with customer service things when you potentially have, you know, a family member, an employee that's an EMT and is going to get swept up by the sheriff's office or something like that. So I would just be careful relying too much on existing revenue streams that are reliant on tourism, because it's possible that those things are going to be made illegal. Other than that, I think that there's some great ideas here. I just want to point out that, like, being a leader in this, like, you know, Patagonia as a company shut down very early. I think that companies like that are going to go down in history as the ones that really help prevent the outbreak. And I think that's the side of history that you want to be on.
Really appreciate that perspective, Luke. I would just, I'll throw one small piece out there, which is folks hopefully have found or can find our phone to action legislative interface. We do have a unified message, and we're trying to get relief for the industry pass through with these packages that are coming. So the greater we can, as an industry, reach out to our local legislators with that unified message, the better. So thanks for flagging that. And indeed, it's very serious. Did our panelists want to respond to Luke?
I'll just say I think he's right.
Yeah, Nate here. Yeah, I agree with Luke. I'm dependent upon what happens over the next. I think what happens over the next 6 to 8 weeks. And Luke, you've got an education that certainly gives you a lot more insight than we have. But I think my Joe Blow on the street observation is I think over the next 8 weeks, that's going to really determine what's going to happen, both in our country and certainly for businesses like ours. I'd also point out that currently, I know Washington, California, and a number of other states have declared emergencies already, and the SBA is going to get funded a lot more for small business loans. So that's obviously a resource that we should all take a look at. I know that here in California, we had that option back, I think in '97. A number of outfitters took out some pretty sweet loans through the SBA because of emergencies that occurred in our state. But that's something that I think we'll all have to take a hard look at. And I think Luke's observation that that companies like Patagonia are going to be looked at with a very in a very good light. I think that's really a very prescient, and and certainly I know that we'll take a look at that for my company, our company, how we're going to deal with all this. But again, if you're realistic and you're not giving out, if the message that you come up with now and over the next 4 to 6 weeks is realistic and isn't candy coated and is dealing with the issues in an honest way, I think that you can say things like, we're planning to do this, and here's what we're going to do. And also, I think part of that message will be, we're gonna adjust this on a week-to-week basis, just like the feds are doing. Only hopefully more coordinated. Sorry, but yeah, just like the government is doing, like society's doing. It's like Luke said, on a week-to-week basis. He keeps looking at at his assessment, and then keeps coming up worst-case scenario. Well, if that keeps happening, obviously we're going to have a very different year.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that. I'm going to call on Michael Cohen, who has his hand up. He's self-muted, but it looks like he's on now. Michael, do you have thoughts, concerns, questions? Oh, he's
Hang
muted
on.
again.
You hear me?
There, we
Can
got
you hear?
Yep. Yeah, we can.
Okay, I just have a couple comments here from California. Mine's Santa Barbara Adventure Company. We're a multi-sport outfitter that also does outdoor education programs. So we are effectively shut down for our entire spring. We have had the powers above us really dictate whether we're running or not, as everyone else has, such as wineries and bars are closed in our area. The national park has suspended the charter boat transportation to our island. So those factors are controlling us, and they're really guiding us. The point I wanted to say is that Luke was actually right on the money with his comments, very smart and well said. If we could get that synthesized and put back to the group in a final comments, that would be great. From our local VSB, which is our tourism hub, they just put out some information on a study from their social media, and they're seeing that people are really sharing and communicating about activities and nature. They're pent up inside, and the amount of shares and comments and likes are all very high because people are stuck on their phones at home. So you could target your marketing towards, when we finally break this crisis, and putting out some ideas for activities after we get to a safe place. And so, that was my comment for this group. So what we're going to try to do is really focus on June and July and open up the calendar there with a loose refund policy. Also, reaching back to your people who are canceled after we break and get back into a more normal state, reaching back to them and offering an incentive for them to rebook. So say 10%, we're back on operational for July, and trying to give them an incentive to join. So that was my comments for this group. Thank you.
It's really smart.
Yeah, thank you very much, Michael. Interestingly, when we were on an emergency board meeting yesterday, it was, it was related how significantly private attendance is up at national parks, at national forests, to the point where it's hard to retain the social distancing on trails. They're so crowded. So interesting, challenging new conundrum. And I've got sort of this double hit from Jan was 10. Sorry, Jan. I'll let you say your own last name, Jan Wachansky. And so I'm just going to unmute you. It looks like you're self-muted, actually, Jan. If you want to join us and follow up on Michael Cohen, I think that'd be great.
Yeah, hey folks, it's pronounced Jan, the first name. I won't go into the last name. I'm calling in from North Carolina with the Nantahala Outdoor Center. We're a multi-sport outfitter that also runs a resort property in 4 states in the Southeast. Appreciate you calling on me. I wanted to follow up on that last comment. I think there were some really important pieces of that are forward-looking. I think in some instances we're all lucky that we work in travel. It's obviously going to be greatly affected by this on a worldwide scale, but it also helps reinforce the value proposition of travel. And I think it could have the effect of really creating pent-up demand as we start to come over the other side of this. And the question is, when will that happen, and what changes will we see across travel, and specifically adventure travel, that we as outfitters need to pivot and react to? And so I wonder if there's the opportunity now, focusing on what we can control, to better understand our customers and to better understand the short-term and long-term changes that this crisis is going to put on our audience. And for us, we are very much a drive time business. We don't rely on air travel. And so I personally wonder what that's going to mean to our demographic and to the geographies that we typically engage with throughout the course of our season. There has been a little bit of industry study going on, and I wonder if AOA as a subgroup has the opportunity, with our members spread out across the US, to really help share some information on what we're seeing there, so that we are collectively as an industry able to pivot, whether that's in May, June, July, and better able to speak to the right people at the right time once they're ready to travel again and to engage in some of our services. And so I guess that's a collective question for the group and for the panel, but also candidly for AOA, in that, as a organizing body, y'all might be set up really well to help outfitters better understand some of that through things like research or surveys that allow us to understand what that evolving audience landscape looks like as we come down the other side of this pandemic.
Thank you very much, Jan, for that inquiry and question. Just to sort of answer what outdoors will be, we start to see the other side of this. I think you're spot on. That we will be able to put some suggested messages out there, get the word out about where people are, and if they might be adjusting quickly or slowly to stepping back out into society in the real world, and also just trying to communicate a message for the industry where we can. Some of that is earned media. We, through op-eds, et cetera, that are encouraging people to reconnect and to use outfitters and guides to do so. So certainly premature to start heading in that direction now, but hopefully in a few weeks we can start to think differently. So thank you so much for that. Yeah. I appreciate that. John Ganano has been shooting a bunch of questions at us, and I wanted to give him a chance to respond. Nate, Skip, are you guys okay if we go a few minutes long?
I'm fine. Whatever you end up with is fine by me.
Yeah, I'm happy.
I thought it said 12:30 on the note that you sent out originally from Hillary, so I was prepared to do that. So.
Right. Yeah.
12:30
yeah,
my
we tried
time.
to fix that. She was keeping the. I know it says I'm Hillary, but she was keeping she was trying to make sure the webinar would stay open if we went long. So
cool. Good for her.
It was for 90 minutes.
So
here we are.
Yeah. Here we are.
So did anybody want to respond to Jan a little bit? As I understand it, Nantahala Outdoor Center is one of the ones that has shut down temporarily. Skip,
I think Skip, go.
Was there a question?
Well, he wanted to know if we wanted to respond, and the one thing that I think Jan was asking about primarily, or what I took, there was a lot that he had that was really relevant, but the question I think that Jan asked and wanted to get an answer from us on was what kind of information we as an industry had. I believe that's what Jan was asking about, and I can tell you that as an industry in California, we don't have that organized. We've individually done stuff here. We're just now starting to get our act together in some of the local areas. So I can't really answer that in a positive way because I don't have that information for California per se. We have not done that.
Okay.
I must admit, I don't feel like I'm really qualified to answer this question because I know who you guys are and I know some of what you do, but I don't know, I read Jan's question really as being more one towards what should AOA as an organization do from a messaging standpoint. And
yeah,
I think that's a fair question. The only guidance I could really give you from my position of absolute gross and blithe ignorance is to is to get out there and communicate what's going on and what you're planning to do about it as outfitters. Now, whether or not, I'm not sure that it's relevant or particularly useful for AOA as an organization to create any kind of a blanket statement on this kind of thing. I do think it's potentially valuable to the membership for AOA to provide some guidance. I'll give you an example of that. When this first started breaking, after it started breaking, but I provided similar commentary to the Association for Challenge Course Technology several weeks ago that was basically intended as guidance for their members of things that they should consider under the circumstances. I think that's a function that AOA could probably do, but ultimately AOA does not run your businesses, and you have to make the decisions as individual business owners what the best approach for you is. AOA can certainly provide you with some resources that you could consider. I think it would be a mistake, very, very candidly, for AOA to say anything that or put out anything that would actually be directive.
Interesting. Thanks for that. Thanks for that advice. Yeah, we do have some guidance, but as it changes, our guidance changes. So many
Absolutely.
questions,
and expect that to happen for a while.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you. I'm going to give John Ganano a chance to ask his questions. He's operator out of Harpers Ferry.
Can you all hear me? Am I unmuted?
Yep, we can hear you.
Yep.
Okay, great. Yeah, I shot out a few questions. The first one is, we have a campground, and I'm wondering there's some questions about groups of 10 or more. What does that mean? There's RVs, cabins. Is the entire campground considered to be a group of 10? Has anybody heard anything about protocols for campgrounds?
This is Skip. I would suggest you check with your local authorities on that one, because different states are doing different things along these lines, and I think it's probably, unless or until the federal government sets out any kind of directive on this kind of thing, you are going to be looking at things from a state level. So, and things are likely to change as well. So I would work locally first to get guidance on that. And there's another thing I would like to bring up, because I just shortly before this call got some guidance on insurance that was sent to another one of my clients, which basically says you got to be really careful, because under certain circumstances, just inviting people in could be considered gross negligence, and you're not covered for that. So, and that's
Wow.
a little bit of an exaggeration, but not much. I would encourage you to talk with your insurance carriers about what this means for your organization, for your coverage, and where that goes. Most insurance policies do not cover you for infectious disease. And I'd encourage you to check with your individual providers on that. My guess is they probably, most of them have some guidance either already available or in development.
I'm going to jump on there too, and just flag some things that are coming through our question for you that I think it's worth knowing that California has closed all its state parks. Canada announced it's closing all campgrounds, parks through the end of April. So this could be the situation now, but it's changing. In recent conversations I've had with the Forest Service, as they work on their guidance, they are trying to push the decision down and let local line officers make choices not only about whether campgrounds can stay open or not, it's about whether operators and guides can continue to operate in a way that's consistent with CDC guidelines. So, in your case, John, I would think about that. And what they're saying is that yes, some campgrounds you can maintain social distancing. Some campgrounds actually don't lend themselves to that. So in particular, I think bathrooms and other gathering places are things to be sensitive about. So,
Right.
and I'm gonna just like carry on, because you also asked a question about rafting trips, and there's another
right.
about social distancing inside a raft. As we try to accommodate the new rules, can we realistically meet them? And can you, as an operator, feel like you're meeting the health and safety standards that are being pushed by either your locality or your state. And certainly, yeah, if our panelists have any thoughts on that, we'd welcome your thoughts. I just wanted to put that out there.
That's an interesting question, and Nate here, and it's something that we've started talking about. Me and my management team, my partner, and some local folks up here with some ideas along those lines. I don't know what the full answer is, but like I have a friend who runs a photography company up here, and he was saying, hey, maybe what you do is when you have a family of four, actually my office manager mentioned this, maybe when you have a family of four, you know, that family gets a guide in the boat. Even though we normally put 8 people in it, maybe that's what we're going to do. You got a group of 5 or 6 that comes up, they get in the boat, and that's just them. So those are the kinds of things I think you could take a look at. I don't know what we're going to do. We haven't sat down and made some hard and fast choices. So we're just throwing ideas out there or thinking about that kind of stuff. But I think there's a way to do that. Instead of doing a 30 or 40 person group safety orientation talk at the beginning of the trip, maybe we send each one of the guides off with their boat and they do their own safety orientation talk with just that one group. Those are like some of the things that I think are possible. How that works when you've got 3 couples coming up, you're not going to put 2 people on a boat with 8, that holds 8. We can't do that really safely, and also economically, it doesn't make sense for us to go down that route. So I don't know what the full answers to those are, but I think I think that your question was that John? I think it's a good question to start pondering and sort of exploring and seeing how you want to do that for your business. But I don't know the answers yet. I don't know if I ever will. We'll play it by ear.
Thank you. Yeah, just for folks who are calling in, we're polling those who have tuned in via webinar. And our last poll was if folks are trying to operate through this, 38% are continuing to operate, 43% have suspended some operations, 19% have suspended all operations. We have a request from the question queue that for folks who have partially closed, if they could give some examples of what they closed and what they have still open. So as we call on a couple more people, if you have something relevant to share with the community on your partial closure, or if that's what you are, please do share it. That would be super. So Donnie Dove has had his hand up for about 25 minutes. So Donnie, I'm unmuting you, and you are please join our conversation. Can you hear me, Donnie? He may have got tired of having his hand up. I'm going to put your hand down. Oh, are you there, Donnie? 63 minutes. That's how long his hand was up. I'm going to put your hand down, Donnie, and if you do have something to ask, please put it back up. And Emma, I'd like to unmute you. You're self-muted, but did you have something you wanted to share? I did see you. This is Emma Tejeda out of Moab, California, with Sherry Griffin. You're muted. You're muted on your end, Emma. She doesn't seem to be coming through, so we're going to move down the line. Kimberly Vaughter. Kimberly, where are you out of, and how can we help you? We may be running back into technical difficulties. Could my panelists just speak up and let me know you can hear me or hear each other?
Skip is here. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I hear you, Aaron. We hear each other.
Well, at least we all are, listening to each other. I haven't seen any more sort of emergency chats, but I'm not having luck right now in connecting with folks who are asking questions. So
I'd love it if.
Try once more with Julie Thorner. Julie, can you hear me? No. We have one more hand, and so I've left everybody. I'm just leaving you all who I've been calling on unmuted so that if you are able to speak later, you can. Todd Collins.
Yes, Aaron, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Yeah, great. And it looks
Great.
like everybody can. Yeah.
So we're a whitewater outfitter in Washington State, so we have been mandated that we're closed. So our operations are closed.
Yeah.
But for the folks who are still operating, I have to say I was pretty surprised to see how many people are actually operating. But for the folks who are operating, how are they handling transportation and social distancing at the same time? I'm curious how, because I assume we're going to reopen someday, but we'd like to know how to handle that.
On buses, right? On 9 to 15 passenger vans. Nate, Skip, if you have advice on that, that's great. Otherwise, somebody in the group can certainly throw their hand up, and we'll try to get your input.
I don't have, again, we're still figuring out what we're going to do, and we've talked about that social distancing. Certainly, we talked about that just a few minutes ago in terms of people being in rafts, but the transportation is critical. And so I'd love to hear, I was hoping to hear from a lot, I'd love to hear from all of you that are out there about how you're dealing with that, because I guarantee you're all a lot smarter than I am. Anybody?
What do I want to say to this? I think I think people are grappling with that, and I haven't heard like the clear solution yet. It's, can you go down with the windows open? Can you spread people out among the bus? Somebody is answering, Dania is answering that they're doing one trip at a time for canoeing and kayaking so they can maintain social distance between the group and the driver in the van. It's a hard question to answer. Certainly, you wouldn't want to fully pack a bus. And beyond that, I think use judgment and try to encourage that your guests are using good judgment and doing their best to practice social distancing while you transport them down. Scott Gehrman actually jumped in with really good guidance, which says to keep people to groups of 10. So 10 would be appropriate CDC guidance unless your local your local authorities are saying something differently. Even with 10, you still want to try to have that social distancing maintained. So thank you. And going to.
I mean, one thing, Aaron, I would point out is, I mean, if you've got let's say you got different, everybody's a little different. We've got our company, we have, maxi vans, and we have, 33 passenger minibuses and 56 passenger full-size buses. Maybe this year, one idea would be if we got a smaller trip, a group of 8 and a group of 6, we don't put them in the maxi van. We put them in the 33 passenger minibus, something like that. So that gives you the quote unquote social distancing. I mean, that's all going to be, those are going to be the kinds of things that we're going to have to think about in terms of dealing with the situation on the ground.
Yeah. Eric Plakanis. And I just want to, John Ganano, if you're able to get across, I do have your mic open.
Yes, I'm here. I'm here.
John. Oh, okay, great. John, why don't you go first?
I already went. I think the other question that I had was, what's that?
Confuse myself with my own systems.
Yeah, I'd
Sorry,
already
John.
started passing notes. I didn't think I was going to get called on the teacher anymore. I guess I was just curious if if other outfitters we've kind of put a halt on everything. We're still early in the season. We're not really to the point of operation. But hiring season gears up right now, and if other people are going full speed ahead with hiring, are we putting that kind of stuff off? But all these questions I'm hearing, there's a lot of questions in terms of, how profitable are our trips going to be when we're spacing people out and limiting the numbers on rafts. I don't really, what I'm saying here, I don't know that I have any answers. I'm just throwing out some thoughts.
Yeah. Yeah, lots of folks are closing down. Interestingly, I think enough folks in this group, and I'm getting some feedback on the questions pane, that some of the poll questions don't really pertain since they haven't actually started operating yet. So that's a factor, which is good. And John, I look at the it's really hard right now to plan for the best and prepare for the worst because they're so dramatically different. And planning, preparing for the worst could be the reality that 40 to 60% of the population gets this, and by the time we get to the end of April, we're looking at 10 million cases. By the time we get to the end of mid-April, we'll be looking at 100 million cases. So that's a real reality. And if you've seen some of the shots coming out of Italy, they are on full lockdown. So it is not inconceivable that we could end up in that too. I hesitate to make any predictions. But in my mind, I feel like looking at what happened in Wuhan and looking at what's happened in South Korea and Singapore, there does seem to be a return to normalcy in 45 to 60 days. But we really we don't know. We don't know enough yet. So thanks. Eric, did you want to plug something? Eric Plekanis.
Yeah. In the early days of the epidemic, most of the information coming out concerned the vulnerability of older populations and the unhealthy populations. And there seems to be some new information beginning to emerge that even among younger people, healthy people, there's a not insignificant amount that can get seriously ill, that may need hospitalization and so on. And I was just wondering if anybody has thought about what happens if we continue to run trips and if some of our guys get this disease and maybe even suffer some serious consequences.
Yeah, that's a good question, Eric. I'm just gonna start by and also just leveraging on that something that Brittany Taylor typed into the questions, which is they just did their hiring and training last week, and now they have to pull all guides from nearly all the trips they were hired for. And she's advising that we exercise caution when hiring, applying dollars toward training, and delay hiring for a month if it makes sense for your trip types, season, etc. I would add to that, just following legislation that is moving through, that there's going to be mandatory sick leave pay for up to 2 weeks, and family and medical leave pay. That I think I don't have the numbers right in front of me. It's like 2 weeks unpaid, and then after that up to 12 weeks of 2/3 paid. So companies will be able to recoup that in their through tax credits, and companies that are smaller than 50 people may be able to get an exemption through the Department of Labor. And for companies that are 50 to 499, we'll be taking on some social welfare. So ensure that you are considering that as you're making your hiring decision. Analyst, any additional insight?
No, that question kind of it put a chill in me, and because it's obvious that we have to, I think I've been thinking about and focusing primarily on, rather selfishly on the effect of our business and on our business and how to make sure our customers are going to be okay with coming up here. And honestly, I will admit that I have not given a whole lot of thought to how this will affect our employees. I will tell you that my management team has thought about that more than I have. My partner has. I don't have any answers for that, but that's a damn good question. How do we, what's the moral implications of that? I mean, we're all adults. We make our own choices based upon what we feel is right for us. But what's the ethical way to proceed forward? I don't think it's ethical if we don't think it's really, really very, very safe to do so. We're already, if you're a river outfitter, we're already offering, a service that has a certain amount of risk attached to it, obviously. And that goes not just for our customers, but our employees. So we're kind of used to that to a degree, but this is different. This is way different, and it's a different kind of beast. And so that's something I think that we should think about. I have no answer to that, other than I'm really glad that question was asked, because I certainly think that's something that we'll talk about probably as a group, I think in a week and a half with my colleagues, and certainly I know that my management team this weekend will be interested in that, in discussing that, I think. And again, I admit to not having given that much thought, and I praise my management team for having already started looking at that before I did.
Yeah. Aaron Lieberman, who's executive director at IOGA, is a good guide advocate, and he was having a very similar conversation with me yesterday, which is what can we say to guides? What resources can we give them if we don't think we're going to have work for them? And so, yeah, we're going to be working through that too, and trying to provide some resources for people who are doing that. And I would ideally like to see us doing some of the work that we're doing for outfitters right now, also for guides, also for our members who are vendors, and sort of broaden this conversation and make sure everybody's included in it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Adam Ferguson, you have your hand up. Did you want to ask something? You're unmuted, but I can't hear you. And so I'm going to, I think we actually are through most of them. Boy, I see you have your hand up, but I need you to put in your audio pin so I can call on you. So hopefully you can come back. Julie Thorner, you're the only person that we sort of have out there with the outstanding hand. So if you have an ability to ask a question, but looks like you're double muted. Now you're just self-muted. Okay, yeah, if you could unmute yourself, Julie, I think. Yeah, there we go. Oh no, it still says you're self-muted. No luck. Hey, yeah, you should see a panel, Julie, up by your interface with a microphone on it, and if you click that, you should come back. And as we're waiting for Julie to unmute, what's funny, Julie, is I see you on there twice. So you might be coming through a couple different places. You might want to just jump off and try to jump back on again. And in the meantime, Aaron Lieberman, who I was just referencing, says, does anyone on the panel or otherwise have insight into, hang on, it got lost. Oh my gosh, these questions are coming so fast. Give me 1 second, guys, just to find that question again. About summer season rafting outfitters who know when the timing is right to start pushing messages and promotion to their audiences, whatever that message is, like it's time to get outside, celebrate connection with the natural world, etc. Yeah.
This is Skip. I think you need. I think in answer to that question, you need to be patient. I think it's reasonable to get your stuff ready to go, but there's, this situation has changed so dramatically over the last 2 to 4 weeks that it seems like every day there's some new fresh hell. And I think we would be fooling ourselves if we didn't think that that might not continue for a little while. Get ready to go with that messaging, but I think you really need to be sensitive to what's going on. And I think let's project forward a little bit. What I expect to see happen, quite frankly, is that the next 2 to 4 weeks we're likely to see just this continual cascade of terrible numbers that are going to be scaring the living crap out of everybody. And then there will be a cusp point at which the numbers will start going down. And once that happens, that doesn't mean that the problem is over, okay? It might be another 2 to 4 weeks before people really start breathing a sigh of relief. Even then, it doesn't mean that this virus is any less contagious or that the problem has totally gone away. But that would be the point where I might start very, very carefully, start putting messages out into the marketplace. Hedge your bets on it. Say, there's still a lot we don't know. But at this point, if current trends continue, and this also assumes that the government has lightened up a little bit, I think it's probably okay to start promoting. Just don't be particularly aggressive about it. Be supportive and recognize what people have gone through. Watch your social pages like a hawk. Watch the social pages of either competitors in your immediate area or other services that are analogous to yours in other parts of the country to just sort of see what's being said on their pages. You're going to want to be pretty sensitive to the popular mood and how you're construed. It gets back to that idea. What are people going to think of you after this is all over? And just be really, really careful with the messaging, but you'll probably have a good sense when it's time to go. But it's, that could be a while.
Thanks, Scott. Or Skip. Thank you.
That's okay.
Then, as we've been talking, people have been answering a poll. 41% of folks feel like their business may not survive if this goes on for 3 months and doesn't come back robustly. John Geiger is just briefly asking Skip your last name and affiliation. Skip King. What is the name of the group you work with?
It's Reputation Strategies, and my email address is sking, S-K-I-N-G, at reputationstrategies.com, and that's all one word.
Yeah. Great. Thank you. And Neil Harding has shared a really good thought here. He says, everyone needs to understand it's not about the ability of healthy staff and guests to stay well. It's the vulnerable people they go home to that will be infected. It's about flattening the infection curve. The right thing to do is, he says, shut down until authorities announce you can do otherwise. That's, I think, Neil's take on Aaron's question. Yeah, certainly a way to go. Julie Thoner, do we have you?
Yeah, hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. Great.
Great. Yeah, sorry about that. A little technical difficulty unmuting. Several staff are on this call, and we all are on as Julie, and I think that might have been part of it. So yeah, I had a few thoughts, really reinforcing some of what's already said. For those who don't know me, I'm a vendor partner or industry partner with AO. I have a marketing agency called Liquid Spark. Our clients are only in the adventure travel tourism industry, so they're all being hit in various degrees at this time. And the things that are coming up that are the most important for us, how we look at this, is risk mitigation. There are two places to be looking at risk mitigation: health, of course, and that's health of not only our guests, but very much our staff. That's just come up with guides. For me as an agency, it's my staff. We had planned to do travel to a conference in an area that was looking suspect. We really, really wanted to go. I pulled the plug before the conference did because the risk of being infected was a risk I could not take. I didn't want us to be infected, and my agency couldn't take it because they would be out on workers, they would be working for the agency and sick. So that's something as well to think of with your businesses. So there's the health risk mitigation. And then of course, the big one looming for us as this quick poll is up about how long we can survive with limited or no revenue is the economic disruption, the financial risk mitigation. So making sure that we're pulling out all stops to minimize the expenses that we can and to secure extra financing availability or lines of credit, figure out how we can tighten our belts. These are things that we in the adventure industry are pretty good at, but we may not have those lines of credit or loans. So that's something my agency as well has had to jump right into and see what's available. So those two things are really important. What we're telling our clients is warmth and competency are really important right now. It's not a time to be selling anything at all because there is so much uncertainty and the virus is escalating in the United States and the numbers are not clear. I mean, the numbers of infections and cases are much higher than are currently being reported. So there's so much uncertainty. What we can do as outfitters and adventure industry people is help inspire, encourage, and calm our guests and our staff. We have an opportunity to really show up to people as supporting their fears and concerns. We will be here for them when it is safe to go outside to do these adventures. We can be thinking about adventures they can do by themselves, places they can go to. If we know the best trails that are not crowded, someone brought up the issue of crowded trails earlier, or it might be a conversation our staff's having in the background, but if there are trails that very few people know, share that information. You all know your areas really, really well. Those are the ways we can show up and be helpful. The comment about sensitivity in terms of sales and messaging right now is really important. We have we are encouraging all of our clients to just stop their paid ads, and any ads that go up are ads of inspiration and how to postpone a trip to a future date. For some of our clients, that's out several years in order to mitigate the impact of cash flow. If we've taken lots of deposits and all of a sudden we have to do a crush of trips in the fall, it's still not going to help us. So many people have extended that postponement into future years. For some of the outfitters on this call who are doing day trips, like we have clients in the Smokies, your business hasn't really started yet. It's still time to put up a reassuring message to clients, but there is so much uncertainty. There may be a recovery in the summer, and it's time to just let people know how you're concerned, what you're doing. There isn't business now. We're ready when people come back, and see how we can step up and support in the communities in which we operate. Many of us operate in pretty rural communities. The vulnerable among us are in really tough shape. One of our staff shared a statistic that 80% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck, and that's an astonishing number. So we have a chance to step up and try to be helpful to those around us. We also, have a comment. I have a blog post. I shared it to in the chat that may be useful. One of the things, and it came up, I think, with Skip talking in the very beginning, when we talk about safety, we want to be very careful how we message that. We really can't keep anyone safe, and we want customers to take responsibility for their safety as well. So we can implement our practices and protocols, do the best that we can to help keep people safe, but we want to be careful how much we say that we are safe. Another client brought up a comment around, if we start talking about our intense new cleaning protocols, we want to make sure that people don't think we haven't been clean all along. We've just stepped it up a notch because of this particular virus. right? Because we're already cleaning our gear. We already have good hygiene with our food, whether it's a lunch on a trip or if it's an overnight trip. So we don't want people to think we haven't been doing a good job all along. We're just stepping it up. I'll pause there. That was sort of a long talk. Thank you.
Could I jump in? Aaron,
Yeah.
real quick?
Yeah.
Julie,
That was
you're amazing. Thank you so very, very much. You shared a whole lot that I thought was just really amazing. I'm sure other folks did too. A couple of things that I wanted to just add on to that. One was I come from, like, my business education was like before I became an outfitter, and so when I started looking at what was going on this year, you know, the last month in particular, last 2 weeks, really in particular, you know, with you know, we're spending money in various places and not getting the phone calls. And my partner, his name's Jeremiah Copper, he pulled the most of our money on ads, and I wasn't excited about it, but I thought, what the hell, we'll see what happens. That, I think, is really, really smart, because because it's different, because as Julie points out, this is a really different scenario. And I can tell you that when I had my MBA at Pepperdine, what they teach you there is that when times get tough, when there's, like, you know, if there's a recession or whatever, things are affecting your business, you don't pull, you invest more in that. You can't do that now. And I'm just now beginning to get that. I mean, like, so that's just one example of how different everything is going to be. The other thing I was going to mention was, you talked about dealing with the financial implications. And one of the things that we're looking at is, you know, approaching, you know, look at ways to not get rid of, well, that'd be great, but to reduce the fixed cost. I know this is basic, but go to your, you know, if you're renting from, you know, if you're renting your facility instead of having owned it, go to the landlord and ask them for, you know, some sort of you know, a break on that, because it's going to affect everybody. It's going to affect the folks who own office buildings and other locations where we might be operating out of. So those are the kinds of things that we should, as an industry, be looking at, whether or not we end up operating this year or not. Certainly, you know, not being in operation for 3 or 6 or 12 months would put most of us in deep risk. And the only way to start dealing with that, I think, is that's one way, is to reduce the fixed costs. But Julie, I loved what you said, and I think it'd be great if you wouldn't mind putting that in writing and sending it off to Aaron so that we could share that with the group as a whole, some of that, including the comment that you had, the help, inspire, inform. I was writing quickly, I didn't get it all, but I thought that was really great. Anyway.
Thank you, Nate. I'd be happy to do that.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
That's funny. I thought I muted you already, Julie, or that you muted yourself. But I see you're still with us. All the better. Great. We have one more hand up, and so I'm going to go ahead and field this question. There's field this from Lindsay Winter, who is an operator in the Grand Canyon. There was a question a long time ago, Lindsay. I think it was coming from Greg McFadden about how Grand Canyon operators are responding with messaging, and if it's unified. Could you maybe sort of get at that real quickly and then dive into whatever you wanted to ask of us?
Yeah. Oh,
Lindsay Winter.
gosh, sorry, I've been a little bit away from this conversation, so I can't exactly right now very accurately.
It's a moving target, absolutely. Did you have a question, or did I just happen to call on an old hand?
I think it was an old hand.
Okay.
Listen. Sorry.
Well, thanks for tuning in. And thanks to everyone who has put a lot of stuff out there. I'm going to be reviewing just this questions vein for about 2 hours to make sure we're getting at what people want and trying to share some of the really valuable insight, perspective, guidance, and language that some of you have offered today. So So thank you, and thanks for being here. We're going to keep these kinds of conversations going. Stay tuned for what comes next week. Yeah, Ashley Barreras asked what Grand Canyon Outfitters are doing, and that was Lindsay. I don't think she quite had a clear way to answer that yet, Ashley. And the last communication I can think of that came from John Dillon. I know that one April course, like a first April trip, was canceled. I don't know about any cancellations beyond that with those guys. But maybe they can answer us in the question pane too. Certainly circle back with me, and I'll try to give you a bit more of a lay of the land. The sort of the parallel I could draw is in talking to Dude Ranchers Associations, folks who are in either impacted states or southern states have mostly been shutting down. 1 second, guys. Oh, and so that's in like California, Alaska, or California, Arizona, and Colorado are sort of the states I know of where Dude Ranchers are biggest hit. So that is where we are. We are going to be posting this webinar, everyone, on the AO website. So, and we are, like so many industries, just trying to get our information as widely out as we can. So no membership wall for this video, I don't expect. It's just information that folks need. So thank you for tuning in. Stay tuned. Next week we'll have another community conversation. I think where we need to go from this, that's pretty clear to me, is really look at like what are some of the administrative and operational needs that we're having, because crisis communication is one piece, but people are really grappling with operational questions right now. So we'll try to use our own community to answer some of those questions well. Certainly, like the answer right now is the range, and I'll bet by the time we have this next week, it's going to be pretty different. Greg McFadden says that Azra has canceled their first trip in Grand Canyon, so I think that's what that is. So thank you, Nate, and thank you, Skip, for joining us. Thanks to the 160 people who tuned in and stressed the internet to receive this webinar, participate in it, and help us think about how to meet your needs. And I hope that we have a chance to have these conversations and start to think about optimism, hope, and opening back up and opening up in the weeks and/or months to come. Thank you so much, everybody. Do you have any last thoughts, Skip or Nate, that you want to share? I just want to thank you guys both for making time and staying on extra.
I would just say, I didn't know if you said this. I didn't quite understand. Are you going to post this video on the AO site? Will it be available to non-AO members?
Yeah, that's what I'm doing.
Great. That's it. Okay, great. That I want, because I think that's kind of critical, and I think it just points out why. I mean, I think it's another reason why people should join AO. I mean, it's, you know, it's. I think that's very, very great idea.
The last thing I'd say is simply wishing you all good health and the very best of luck. Things are going to be tough for a little while, but my very best wishes to you all, and thank you for having me.
Thank you, Skip. Thank you, Nate.
Thank you, Skip.
Thanks to all. Yeah, and we will be seeing you again soon.
Okay, you guys take care.
You take care too.